Accused of breaching NASA. Accused of breaking into the Pentagon. 40 million credit card numbers stolen. And at the center of it all wasn't a spy, wasn't a foreign agent, just a teenager sitting in his bedroom in South Florida. His name was Jonathan James. He wasn't working for a foreign government, and he wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was just a kid who liked figuring out how things worked, and what started as curiosity would end in one of the strangest, saddest stories in hacking history. To understand how he got there, we have to go back to where it all started, a quiet suburb in South Florida, 10 years earlier. It's 1989. Jonathan is 6 years old, and while other kids are outside playing, he's parked in front of the family computer. His father, a programmer, tries installing parental controls. Jonathan breaks through them without much effort. By his early teens, he's devouring books on coding languages like C and Unix, spending nights awake studying source code, and at one point wipes Windows off the family PC to install Linux entirely on his own initiative. His obsession causes real friction at home. When his parents confiscate his computer, he runs away rather than live without it. By 15, under the alias Comrade, Jonathan is already known in hacker circles as one of the best. He isn't in it for money or damage. He likes proving a system isn't as secure as it thinks it is, and often he'll leave a polite note for the administrator afterward, pointing out the hole and how to patch it. That's the mindset he brings to NASA in the summer of 1999. When he sets his sights on the Marshall Space Flight Center. He gets into 13 NASA computers, and this time, he does something almost nobody his age could pull off. He downloads a piece of software NASA used to run the International Space Station, the systems that kept the station livable for the astronauts on board, worth $1.7 million by NASA's own estimate. Jonathan later said he didn't have a specific target in mind. He just wanted real, working code to study, and figured NASA's would do fine. He hadn't hijacked the station or gained any way to control it from his bedroom. Downloading the code was nowhere close to that. But NASA still had to shut its systems down for 3 weeks to be safe, at a cost of around $40,000. 2 months later, he goes after the Pentagon, breaching a server tied to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the office that tracks nuclear, chemical, and biological threats to the U.S. He installs a backdoor, intercepts thousands of internal messages, and pulls 19 employee usernames and passwords, several with access to military systems. In January of 2000, not long after his 16th birthday, the FBI showed up at his door. They take his computers, his Palm Pilot, even his Star Trek novel as evidence. He admits to everything immediately. Months later, charges come down, and Jonathan James becomes the youngest person ever convicted of a cybercrime in the United States. Because he's a minor, he avoids the decade in prison an adult might have faced. Instead, he gets 6 months of house arrest, a ban on personal computer use, and letters of apology to write to NASA and the Pentagon. When he later fails a drug test, a probation violation, he's sent to a juvenile facility for 6 months. His father would later say prison changed him, leaving him strangely withdrawn. Jonathan walks away from hacking for good, or so he believes. Around the same time of Jonathan James's release, another young hacker is taking a very different path. Albert Gonzalez, also born in the 80s, also caught breaking into NASA as a teenager, doesn't stop after his own FBI visit. In the early 2000s, he started trading on Shadow Crew, a marketplace built around stolen credit card data. Caught pulling cash with cloned cards in 2003, he cuts a deal. He'll inform the Secret Service. He does, helping take down other members of Shadow Crew. But the informant's salary isn't enough for him, so he keeps hacking on the side, launching a scheme he calls Get Rich or Die Trying. Alongside an accomplice named Christopher Scott, there was a third hacker in the crew who went only by the initials JJ, a detail worth holding on to. Together, Gonzalez's crew drives around parking near retail stores, using laptops and radio antennas to break into weak store Wi-Fi networks, a technique known as war driving. Once inside, they plant sniffer programs to vacuum up card data as customers check out. Office Max alone forces roughly 200,000 cards to be reissued. Over the next few years, the crew hits BJ's Wholesale Club, Boston Market, Barnes & Noble, Forever 21, and biggest of all, TJX, the parent company of TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Around 96 million TJX customers are affected. In total, the crew steals data from roughly 180 million cards, causing close to $400 million in damage. It becomes the largest identity theft case in U.S. history, and the Secret Service eventually realizes their own informant is the one running it. In May of 2008, Jonathan James was 24, living a quiet, withdrawn life in his childhood home with his brother. His mother has died of cancer, he's struggling with depression. Then the Secret Service raids his house, having traced the line from Gonzalez to Scott to him, suspecting Jonathan is the mysterious JJ. Agents search the house and find a gun, along with a suicide note, one he'd actually written years earlier, unrelated to any of this. By his own account, neither is taken from him. Reading through the case documents, Jonathan realizes Gonzalez has been a federal informant this whole time, quietly running hacks while ratting out other hackers to stay protected. He becomes convinced the feds need a fall guy, and that an innocent, sympathetic face like his will make a better headline than the men who actually did the damage. He's read enough hacker lore to believe the system will bend the truth to win. Having already served time once for something far smaller, he can't face the idea of years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. 2 weeks after the raid, on May 18, 2008, Jonathan James took his own life. This time, he leaves behind a new note, written for this moment, saying he no longer believes in the justice system, and that dying free is the only way he can still call it winning. When he died, Jonathan James had never been charged, tried, or convicted of anything connected to the TJX case. In 2010, Gonzalez was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Agents dug up over $1 million in cash buried in his parents' backyard. Christopher Scott gets 7 years. It later emerges that the alias JJ likely didn't belong to Jonathan at all, but to another hacker entirely. The same nickname, the wrong kid. While hackers like Gonzalez and Scott set out to profit off what they broke into, and kept doing it long after they knew better, Jonathan never did. He was just a curious kid who happened to be really good at something. And in the end, that's what cost him everything.